Okay, so now that we've talked about controlling the smoothing through the loops and through the creases, I'm going to control the smoothing through both, right? We're going to kind of combine the two techniques, right? I'm just going to make some sort of like simple spearhead, I guess you could say, or like arrowhead or something. Just some shape that's got some curvature to it, that also has like a little bit of interesting sharpness, I guess, like serratedness to it, I suppose. So again, I'm basically starting off the same way we start pretty much anything like this off, right? Mirror modifier on the bottom, oriented down the forward axis. I may as well slice it in half again, right? Because I know that this is going to be symmetric on both sides. Cool, and I want to mirror along the x-axis now. So now it's mirroring in 4 directions, right? It's going across the horizontal axis and then the vertical axis. Now I'm just going to kind of start shaping this to be like some sort of interesting shape, like really stylized. And the funny thing is, I'm actually going to use n-gons to do this, right? Now, hold your horses, don't freak out yet. I'm going to show you why this is kind of okay in this scenario, right? So you could imagine that maybe this is like either like a really weird sword, or maybe there's like a javelin shaft back here, or just something, right? This is just a bit of an interesting shape. I'm then going to smooth this with subdivision, which has then blobified our mesh, and because we've got, you know, fat n-gons here, Blender doesn't really know what to do with this geometry, but we're going to help guide it, right? And we're going to guide it by using those creases, okay? So I actually really like this idea here of this like sharp edge. I'm going to play this up a little bit by subdividing this, bringing that down like that. Okay, so again, it still looks crappy, right? And we've got this like huge n-gon, and this is all pretty gross, right? So I'm going to start creasing these, and we're going to start seeing our shape come back pretty rapidly as I crease these. Might grab that, crease that out, and I want that crease to continue down the blade, right? You can also see here some interesting pinching here. This is happening because Blender's are really struggling with this, like to smooth this face out, and it's getting like pinching. So this is sort of like one of the reasons why you tend to avoid these n-gons, but I did mention before that we were actually going to use them in this example, right? But, you know, we don't want this to resolve like this, so I'm just going to run a knife cut here, and that'll smooth that out because it's allowing Blender to handle this edge here, right? Might even do the same here, just to clean that little bit up as well, right? Cool. So if I duplicate this over here, we've now got a shape that's actually quite interesting, and the forms are a little bit difficult to make, right? We've got a lot of these like curved surfaces. There's a lot of like character to this that would otherwise actually be quite difficult to model in. And again, like leaning on the subdivision modifier, we have made a whole boatload of geometry without actually having to model any of this in. Right, this would be a nightmare to run loop cuts all day, and it's not robust to change, right? Like if I decide that I want to change this, I can, just by kind of moving this vert around, right? So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to drop my subdivision down a little bit, sort of to like level 1, right? And I'm doing that by, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't have my screencast keys on. I'm doing that by pressing Control 1 and 2, right? So I'm going to drop it down to level 1, and now I'm going to apply my mirror and apply my subdivision, and I'm going to look at what's happened, right? Have you noticed how Blender has filled in all this geometry and turned it all, like it's gotten rid of the n-gons, and it's actually replaced it with quads? There is no shape on this entire object, no matter how weird that it looks, that isn't a quad. See how that's a quad? Like this is a quad. Even this weird shape here is actually a quad. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's because all n-gons and all triangles, when subdivided with that modifier, will freely convert down into quads without fail, right? So this is why when people say things like, you know, your model needs to be like all quads and all these sorts of things, that's a really sort of misleading statement, right? Because it's actually incredibly easy to make an all quads mesh. You just subdivide it like once. This is an all quads mesh. But this geometry is actually dreadful, right? there's an argument to be made that it's not dreadful because it smooths correctly and this is in a high to low workflow. That's fair enough. However, right, we don't want to get into these like really bad habits of just leaving geometry like this. So we don't need to lose sleep over this, but we do want to fix this up a little bit. And the way that we're going to do that is by going back, like Control-Z back to the subdivision stage, and just giving Blender some more geometry here, like these cuts that make sense to guide the final subdivision that's going to happen, right? Might do that, cool. Now I'm going to drop it down to 1 and apply it, and we're going to look at what we get out. Okay? So this geometry now is much nicer in general, and again, everything on here is now going to be quads, and we just get that magically, right, by virtue of subdividing the whole thing. We have this little shape up here. It's a bit weird, right? Maybe could look more like this, maybe bring that up to here, maybe move that there. But in general, this topology is actually, you know, pretty solid for a shape like this. Now what I can do is I can put another smoothing modifier on again, and we're sort of going back to using the subdivision. We're going back to that automatic like modeling, but I'm going to actually turn creases off, right? We're not going to use the creases. I'm going to leave them there just so we can see our edges, but these purple lines are no longer being used. Now we're back to smoothing but without any edge control. But because we've guaranteed the quad-like nature of this whole mesh, it's now going to be incredibly easy to bring control loops in that are capable of subdividing this mesh, right? That are capable of controlling the smoothing. Before I get into that though, I'm going to re-establish my mirror modifier by cutting that half off and then the bottom, right? And then I'm going to add that back. Mirror modifier on the right, but we want this at the top of the stack and then vertically. Okay, now from here, I'm going to start establishing those control loops. All right, and I'm going to get rid of that smooth by surface, and I'm just going to say the entire thing is going to be smooth, right? Now I can start running these sort of control loops like this to start getting some of those shapes back. Right? So do you see how, even though this geometry was actually kind of terrible, we were able to use sort of like a double smoothing approach. The first one using creases, and then the next one using our traditional edge loops in our normal subdivision workflow. And we now have two shapes that are actually incredibly faithful to each other, utilizing the best of both worlds, right? We use the creases to establish our overall shapes. I then drop my sub D down to a lower level, apply it, that quadrifies the entire mesh, and then from there, it's actually incredibly easy to add all the supporting loops that we need to re-establish that form, right? Why would we do this? Why would we do twice as much work? Well, these edges here, right, they've got a little bit of character to them. You know, when you zoom out this far, that's still a sharp edge that could cut you. But when you zoom all the way in, there's just a little bit of curvature to them, just a little bit of character. That's going to catch highlights really well when these bake down to normals. And that's kind of half of the challenge, right, of like a subdivision workflow, is to keep the edges while smoothing out and establishing your overall forms. So this is sort of like, we're now really getting into the more advanced like technique here, because we're leveraging like multiple different like, you know, methods of controlling that smoothing, right? So we're kind of increasing in that complexity.